So the Upper Bow Basin, there's Calgary, and there's Bragg Creek. And we can zoom into this special place that you guys say is home. And it was our home for so many years. And most of us like to focus on these charismatic megafauna like grizzly bears. I mean, hard not to, right? They're critical. But we also need to think about the processes and dynamics that actually make the system. Things like wetlands and the movement of water. So we need to move from the more sexy types of features to the more functional ones. And against this spectrum of ecosystem function and wildlife, we're having increasing footprints of land use, whether it be forestry, or rural residential, or recreation, and many more, of course. And it's creating challenges and opportunities. And what I'm seeing, even during my life, but if you go back multiple generations, it's even more alarming, is that we're incrementally, through time, fading off the natural capital of this landscape, day by day by day. So we've got an environmental sustainability challenge. So I was thinking, well, what are some other titles? And some that came to mind, we're literally using this landscape to death. Death by 1,000 cuts, sanctuary or suburbs. We cannot continue to do everything everywhere all the time. So we're going to start by looking at the study area. We've got to get to know it. And hopefully by the end of this, everyone's got a pretty good understanding of landscape ecology. So the study area is the Upper Bow Basin, nestled southwest Alberta, right up against the Continental Divide, just east of our friends in BC. And there it is. And there's many rivers that drain it, but the most noticeable, of course, are the Bow and the Elbow. And Calgary, where these two rivers come together. This is a landscape of 15,000 square kilometers. It's one of the most iconic landscapes in all the world. I have been in Australia, Indonesia, Argentina, and people, once they find you're a Canadian, have asked if you've seen the foothills of southwest Alberta. And you guys live in it. And in the geographic center of it is Bragg Creek, and what I'm going to call, for the purposes of this talk, the Greater Bragg Creek ecosystem. And it's an arbitrary area. I just wanted to be able to zoom in and look at land uses, not only in the Upper Bow, but in Bragg Creek. And this is a landscape that's 900 square kilometers and has a radius of 17 kilometers. What I like about this particular image is it really brings home how tight the location of the Greater Bragg Creek ecosystem is, as sandwiched in between Calgary and the Front Ranges. So, the Greater Bragg Creek ecosystem, and if I just use the word Bragg Creek, I'm referring to the Greater Bragg Creek ecosystem. Bragg Creek is east, obviously, of the Protected Areas Network and the Federal Park to the northwest, and Kananaskis and Peter Lougheed directly west, and to the east, of course, Tsuut'ina Reserve, City of Calgary, and administered by Rocky View, just to give a few administrative backgrounds. And of course, in that landscape lives about 1.75 million people. So some information about the landscape. Well, I used the Elsie's model that Guy described, and with some colleagues, in a way that we've done with many other landscapes like this in several other parts of the world, across Canada, United States, Australia, India, and Indonesia. And then with colleagues, and I wanted to shout out to Matt Carlson, who really helped me prepare some of this data. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about methodology, and if you want to talk about that later, we certainly can. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that we've got every single seismic line, well site, pipeline, cut block. And if someone built a shed last week, I bet you I don't have that data. But I bet you've got well over 95% of it. So I think the results are very, very reasonable. Okay. Now, before we get into that information, I just want to remind people that this is an information-rich world. The publications of people like Lauren Fitch and Andrew Nikifork and Kevin Van Tighem and Rick Snyder organizations like CPAWS, AWA, Y2Y, Mistacus, the Elbow River Drainage, the Elbow River Watershed people and the Bow River, and local organizations, Bragg Creek Wild, Bragg Creek Environmental Coalition, and Bragg Creek Trails. I mean, there's a tremendous assortment of information and people. So way beyond what I'm going to tell you tonight. You're living in an information-rich landscape. And I had the opportunity to look at and watch Guy Greenaway's presentation to the Chamber of Commerce and talking about natural capital and how to incorporate it into planning. So if anyone hasn't downloaded his presentation, it is really worth watching, highly instructive.